What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Around the Paul. And guess what, everybody? It is game week, and Clemson fans have had this one circled on their calendar for about 2 years now. It's the Clemson Tigers and the Georgia Bulldogs, and we are inside 48 hours away until kickoff at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, Georgia. And we're very happy to be joined tonight by our very special guest, Robert from the DGD podcast. And for those who don't know, that stands for Damn Good Dogs. So we hope the score's not bad in Clemson's favor. We hope it's good in the Tigers' favor come Saturday. But either way, we're happy to have Robert on, and he'll give some great insight into the Georgia side of things. We'll break it down from the Clemson side. And at the end, if you stick around long enough, we might even drop some score predictions in there for you. So welcome in. We're glad everybody's watching and listening, and we appreciate this being your podcast home for the Clemson Tigers. So let's just get right into it. This is, as far as I'm concerned, it's the game of the week in the all of college football. I don't care what people out in College Station or Notre Dame or Baton Rouge have to say about it. I think the best game's going down in Atlanta, Georgia. So, Robert, let's kick it off with you. What's been the feeling and the perception around this game in Athens, and for the Georgia fans, the coaches, and the program itself? How do things kind of look on your end?
Well, first things, guys, thanks for having me on. When it comes to that, man, I think this offseason, I think you're at this point now where the guys just want to hit somebody different. We're at this point, fall camp's basically done. And, at this point, you're, game planning heavy on Clemson, right? Obviously, couple days left till the game. All right, you're full out, ready to go. Seems like everything's been good so far for the offseason. You're not going to hear this out of Kirby Smart, but I have this deep feeling in my gut that last year has a little bit of sting to it. Right, I think there's a point to prove. I don't think we're going to pull a Florida State and let it, just dwell on it, but I think it's something that, it's extra motivation at anything. I like the fact that Kirby is not like harping on it, right? If you're unfamiliar, we went 1-6 after that SEC title loss, but it seems like everything's been good. I know there's been some injuries, but overall it's been a pretty good camp. We've had some guys come back that we need, and looking forward to Saturday, start of the season.
All right, before we go any further, let's give a shout out to one of our fine sponsors, Venture Concrete in Greenville, South Carolina, where concrete meets excellence. Transform your property with the help of our expert concrete services. And at Venture Concrete Greenville, we pride ourselves on delivering top-notch, licensed, and insured concrete services to homeowners all over the Greenville area. From driveways to patios to building slabs, our team of trained professionals can handle any residential project with ease and expertise. Venture Concrete is owned and operated by Clemson Tigers, serving Clemson Tigers and the upstate of South Carolina. You are always on solid ground with Venture Concrete. Yeah, absolutely. And, I think over on the Clemson side, I think there's a lot of quiet confidence there as well. And that's one thing we've kind of talked about within our circles as well, is that you don't really hear a lot. You're not hearing a lot of noise coming from inside the program. Even Dabo Swinney, who has never met a press conference he doesn't like, even he's been a little quieter than normal. And so it makes you think that something behind the scenes is maybe brewing, or the team is just quietly confident. But, I think either way, it's going to be a very competitive ball game. Obviously, there's a ton of talent on both sides. But, Griffin, I'm going to come over to you now. And I think one area where people have really been waiting with bated breath to see how Clemson's going to perform on Saturday is the Tigers' offense against Georgia's defense, which, anybody that they're being honest with themselves, regardless of their fandom, will recognize it's a top 2-3 unit in all of college football. But the question is, Cade Klubnik, does he take that final step into stardom in his second full year as QB1, or do we kind of see more of the same of what we've seen? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I agree. I think the biggest question out of this Clemson offense is if Cade Klubnik's going to take the next step. And it's a shame that he has to do this against arguably the best coach in college football and one of the best defenses in college football. But there's a lot on Clemson's side that's good. You're returning a lot of your players. The only thing is your center, which is a very big question mark given Georgia's defensive line. But in terms of how Klubnik has been going into this game, to his interviews earlier this week, he said he was very calm and he was very confident, and he's been treating every day this week like it's a normal day of fall camp. And he says that if any player should be excited for game week, that they're doing it wrong, that they should be excited, that they are just excited to play football. And like you said, Robert, that, you know, they just want to hit somebody else. As Bear Carter said too, he just wants to hit somebody else too. So there is a little bit more confidence, leadership in Cade. And maybe you won't see that week 1 against Georgia just because of the high octane defense that they do have. But I think that you will see strides, and maybe it's not perfect from him on Saturday, but I think that you're going to see a lot different approach from Cade with that second year under an offense, especially under a guy like Garrett Riley.
Yeah, and Cliff, you know, another factor I think that everybody needs to consider is when you look back over the past 3 seasons, look, the Clemson wide receiver core has the easiest way to say it, the bluntest way to say it is they haven't been good. I think that's probably a little bit more stabilized this year, and I think a lot of that has to do with the health of that unit. Troy Stellato, I think, is finally healthier, getting on the healthier side. Adam Randall looks to be in good shape. Antonio Williams is healthy. But then let's throw in the freshman factor. You've got those 2 5-star receivers in Bryant Wesco and TJ Moore. Wesco in particular, who everybody is raving about, does that in a way make things a little bit more comfortable for Cade Klubnik, knowing that he finally has that core of guys that he can go to, and it's a little bit more reliable than it has been?
Yeah, I think you're right. And, you know, the last 2 years we've had a freshman, if I'm not mistaken, perform really well.
Well, for the
and
past
have
2
some
years,
crazy
the freshman
numbers.
has led the team in yards.
Yep. And I think there's a good possibility that happens this year between Wesco and TJ Moore. But you know, we're pretty stacked at wide receiver this year. I think we got I say stacked, but I mean we're deep because we had this year. So, thank you, Georgia, for giving us your offensive line coach. We really appreciate that. We do have that. And the offensive line is a lot better this year. At least that's what we're hearing, right? Like they won the first scrimmage. So, and again, I think everything starts up front, and then that helps Cade. And then, of course, that helps the receivers. The receivers can get open. One thing last year and for a while now is we didn't have anybody who could get open. And when they were open, they didn't catch the ball. And so if receivers can just catch the ball and just get open, and with that offensive line and how I've heard that they've improved, you know, I think we'll be good. I think this first game will be tough because of who we're playing, and the defense we're playing, right? So, but I think we're gonna be good as long as we perform well, even in a loss. I think we're gonna be fine.
Yeah, no doubt. And Robert, you know, looking at things from the Georgia side and the Georgia perspective, when Kirby Smart and when this coaching staff, when your coaching staff looks at this Clemson offense, you know, how do you see them game planning for that, knowing that you've got a quarterback in Klubnik who, you know, frankly, and we're not afraid to admit it, has struggled at times. At times he's looked really good. At times he's looked like a deer in the headlights. So how do you feel like your defense is going to approach that? Do they just bring pressure early? Do they try to come straight at him? Or is it just kind of a feel him out early on and just wait and see what the trajectory of the game is starting to take?
First thing I think you look at is you try to find a way to make him uncomfortable early and keep him uncomfortable. Whether that be, you know, obviously I think you want to try to get home to him. But if anything, force him out of the pocket. Not by design. I feel like he does throw a lot of risky throws. And that's something that he's got to grow on, right? If you do that against Georgia, there's a high possibility that becomes a turnover if you're not careful. So if I'm Georgia on that defense, I'm dialing up simulated pressures, making the offensive line uncomfortable too. I think that's where a lot of that starts, right? Looking at that right there, finding out pressures. But at the same time, it's something that we focus on the most, and that's stopping the run game. I think if you're able to neutralize Phil Maffa as good as possible, I think that will also alter the dimension of the Clemson offense to the point where he's got to throw more, and that gives you more opportunity to cause havoc, if you will. So if I'm Kirby and I'm Glenn Schumann, I'm finding ways to make them uncomfortable, get in, get through, find gaps, all these miscommunication on the offensive line, make it just confusing. Georgia has a very complex defense. So, like I said, the simulated pressures can be for a quarterback that struggles with making reads and progressions, things like that, and pre-snap checks, I should say. It can be confusing. So I think Georgia has to do that and make them uncomfortable and keep them there first.
Right. And you mentioned Phil Maffa and Griffin and Cliff. When I look at Maffa, when I look at the type of running back he is, I tell people he is kind of a throwback SEC type of running back in the fact that he's a big guy. He's 6'2", 230 pounds. Maybe not a guy who's just going to blow you away with his speed, but he can just continue to come at you like a battering ram. And, kind of one of the closest comparisons I can give, and he's not quite this big, but you think about somebody like a Bo Scarborough, who played for Alabama back when Clemson won the first title in 2016. Just that really big, powerful, bruising running back. So, Griffin, do you see that maybe is that a matchup that's more in favor of Clemson or Georgia in the fact that Maffa is more of a power back rather than a speedster? I mean, how do you see that factoring into the ballgame?
Well, I think especially towards the end of last year when Clemson went on that big run, ended off the season really well, Phil Maffa was the first part of the offense. Cade was a little bit more of the second option, and you could even see that in the Notre Dame game. You could see it in the Gator Bowl game where Phil Maffa scored 4 touchdowns. He was kind of that first option. He was the safety valve, making sure that, the offense was doing well. I think you have to, and especially as a power back, I think that helps out a lot. But Georgia's Georgia. I think no matter if you're playing a speed back, no matter if you're playing a power back, Kirby Smart is a very good defensive coach. I mean, it's easier said than done. So I think no matter if he's a power back, if he's a speed back, they're going to find ways to get to Maffa. I think Maffa will have his chances, obviously, but it's going to go a lot to Cade to get those third down conversions. If, you're on the 50, it's a 4th and short, it's probably going to be on to Cade to convert those 4th downs. It's going to have to be a little bit more of Cade, but I think you're going to expect at least something out of Maffa, no matter if he's that power back or a speed back, and he'll be a threat no matter what to any team.
Yeah, I wanna interject right here and say that I think, again, this goes back to the receivers, and I think we need to be able to pass the ball a little bit. It's on Georgia to open it up a little bit, but I do think that they will depend on Maffa. With the better offensive line, hopefully he can get his, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, and Robert, when you look at the Georgia defense against the Clemson offense, and we'll kind of go vice versa on this in just a few minutes, but is there any part of the Clemson offense that when you look at Georgia's defense that you think could be a concern, if the chips fall one way or the other? Is there something that you see Kirby Smart maybe focusing on a little bit more heavily in an effort to slow something down? I mean, how do you see that?
I think with trying to stop the offense, I think you look at Antonio Williams. I think I say probably because obviously we'll see once the game starts. I think you try to see which DB that is, probably Dalen Everett. But at the same time, you said like guys like Adam Randall, Brennan Stoll, your tight end, right? Yep. You've got to make sure that you contain those guys and keep them in situations and down and distances that are beneficial for your defense. Can't let guys like that get ahead of you, right? One thing that I think will be interesting to see is how, right outside of Dalen Everett, Jonel Aguero, that's should be our starting star. How does he handle the slot position, or how does he handle coverage and slot and handle the game? And then cornerback too, right? Is it going to be Julian Humphrey? Is it going to be Daniel Harris? I have a feeling it's probably going to be Julian Humphrey. But both of them have a really good camp, and there still feels like there's this battle going on for it. At the same time, though, I need to see those guys clamp down on Clemson's receivers. And if it's hard for Clemson receivers to create separation, that will make it harder for Cade Klubnik and will make it harder for the offense in general, obviously. And that obviously is something that I think Georgia has to capitalize on as well. Also, again, I think the offensive line, it is experience, and I think they're going to have some success in the run game, but you can't get pushed around like Georgia did at times last year. If that happens and Phil Maffa is able to run the ball successfully and keeps Clemson in manageable situations, it could get interesting. I'm not saying it will, but I'm saying it could. If Georgia's defense gets pushed around at times again.
Yeah, and that's a fair point. And Griffin Robert was talking about receiver separation. And, of course, as we all well know, that's something that's been a problem as well, even when you've got healthy receivers on the field. Clemson pass catchers just have not been able to create that separation, getting behind defenses that have put them in a position to make big plays over the last several years. So how critical is that, and how big of a factor is that going to be in whether or not Clemson's offense is successful, or whether we have a repeat of 2021 when they get held to 3 points?
I mean, if Clemson are going to win this game, they're going to need a lot of success in the run game, and they're going to need a lot of success through the air. And every receiver is healthy, I believe. Antonio Williams is back. Adam Randall's back, and he's full of confidence. Speaking to the media earlier this week, you have Bryant Wesco, TJ Moore. If they do not start, they're coming off the bench, making an impact early. Tyler Brown, now a sophomore, led the team in receiving yards last year as a freshman. There's going to be weapons all over the place, and these receivers have proved at times throughout last season, or even in the spring game, looking at Wesco, that they're able to make plays. And it's all a matter of execution, especially, on just the whole offense's part. Garrett Riley's second year, you kind of understand that offense a little bit more. That's what Randall told us earlier this week, that it's a little bit confusing, but they got the hang of it. So it's huge. If you are going to be only able to run the ball against Georgia, this is going to be a long game. And I'm very confident that this Georgia offense will put more than 10 points on this Clemson team if, they don't score.
Yeah, and Robert, let's go the other way on this next topic. And I'm just going to bring up the elephant in the room. And sorry, anybody down in Tuscaloosa, I'm not talking about the Tide. Dogs and Tigers unite. We don't like you. So let's talk about the Georgia offense. And there have been some question marks around certain guys. And you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think you guys lost a pretty good receiver. And there was a question mark around another one. And there's a running back I forget his name. You'll have to fill us in. I think maybe he's a number 2 or 3 running back that's unavailable, if I read correctly. And then everybody's being very tight-lipped about Trevor Etienne. Nobody's quite sure whether he's going to play or is he not. And frankly, I watched Kirby Smart's press conference where he was directly asked if Etienne was going to play, and it was a rather cryptic answer. And I've tried to put myself in a Georgia fan's position, and I'm thinking, oh, wow, if my head coach said that, I'm not sure that I would take that in a positive light when he said, well, I'm not going to talk about that. I'm just excited for the guys who are going to get a chance to play.
Yeah, I think with that whole situation is pretty much everyone's on pins and needles waiting for an accurate answer. And here you are 2 days before the game, and no one has a single clue unless you're Pete Thamel, which, in my opinion, I don't think you heard that from anybody in the building. I'll let that be known. That might be an administration thing, but neither here nor there. If I'm a Georgia fan, though, looking forward to Saturday, my expectation is that he'll be suspended, right? If you go in with if you go in the thought that he's suspended, it kind of helps you lessen the blow if he actually is, right? You're looking at a situation where Roderick Robinson, who you're alluding to, right, goes down with a turf toe, had surgery on that. So
that's right.
Definitely not going to be available for this game. And if ETN is suspended, like some of us think, that's kind of a situation where, Kirby and that staff has really built that room up in the past 12 months. There was times last season where you look at guys like Dylan Bell that were receivers and getting pushed into a running back role and actually thriving, which was, that was fun to watch. But it was definitely not comfortable, So you look at Branson Robinson coming off of a torn a patella injury, I think it was, and rehabbing like crazy to come back. Word in the building is he seems almost as better than before the injury, which to me is just a freaky thing to hear. With his power and size and speed, that combination is pretty interesting. But if you're looking at the situation with running backs, if this is the case, I think most likely at this point, you're going to look at Branson Robinson, and then you'll probably have Nate Frazier and Cash Jones. And the good thing about Cash Jones is a lot of people get hesitant, especially within the Georgia fan base, because, the walk-on situation, you can look at how you want to. But last year, he got a lot of reps and a lot of serious game reps at that. So you can say what you want, but he's experienced. Then you obviously look at Chauncey Bowens possibly, right? At this point, though, I would hope for no injuries in that running back room Saturday, because then it starts to get dangerously thin for this game. And at that point, do you see a Dylan Bell reversion back to the running back to kind of get the running game going? We'll see. And then receiver-wise, I know you had mentioned Robert Thomas being kicked off the team. That a whole situation during the offseason, very sensitive, but at the same time, I felt like it kind of had to be done, if that makes sense. Yeah. Receiver-wise, so I felt pretty good about where we are. Still got guys like Dom Lovett returning, and that I think is going to be a big deal. But with Carson Beck, I think one of the bigger names is Dylan Bell. It seemed like when Carson was playing, the whole time he was playing, to me, it seemed like Dylan Bell had the most chemistry. And that's a good thing for Georgia fans, obviously. You're looking at a situation, you got Colby Young, right, coming in from Miami, 6'5", right? I hope to see him get utilized in, mismatch, right, size mismatches. Saw it at G-Day, loved it. I want to see that go through the system, through the season. I think a lot of the thing, though, if you're not in the Georgia space, if you will, is how Georgia's going to, replicate losing Brock Bowers. I think that's the big elephant in the room. Obviously, Ladd McConkey as well. I think Ladd McConkey was excellent space creation. So you're looking at situations where, right, I think Oscar Delp, right, I know South Carolina fans might be still punching air about that name, but I expect him to have a really
okay, let him punch.
No, I know, I'm with you. I'm 100% with you. But I think you expect him to have a really good year. Ben Urosek coming in from Stanford. Last year may not have been the best season for him due to injury. Year before that, kid was electric at Stanford. And listen, I might be the only Georgia fan, Georgia media person, whoever, to know about Stanford. But he's really good. And then you still got Lawson Lucky. There's a lot of really good receivers. Deep and good ability to rotate is going to be key there. I think you have to have guys like Arian Smith and Anthony Evans. Those are the two guys I think that need to be involved, especially at Saturday's game, just due to the speed and the ability to stretch the field vertically. I want to see Carson Beck hit the field vertically. I think that was the one thing that for me was lacking last season, the consistency on deep passes. If you can start to get those guys in situations downfield and hit consistently, watch out. I'll just leave it there.
Right. Now, Griffin and Cliff, I want to talk a little bit about the Clemson defense because we haven't got to them yet. And as Robert's saying, let's just imagine a scenario going into Saturday where the Georgia running back room is thin and they're down their top two guys and ETN is suspended, whatever the case may be. Does that alter how Clemson approaches the game defensively? I see Cliff shaking his head. So, Cliff, I'll kick it to you and let you take this one. How does Clemson approach that game defensively? Or do you still come after the run knowing that it's thin, try to shut that down, and then concentrate on the back end? Because you know the Tigers have a very deep and talented secondary.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead. You can go first, Griffin. Go for it, man.
No. I will say this because there are shady things on both sides of the ball for Clemson. Jaden Lucas and Shelton Lewis have kind of been rumored to have an injury Dabo said it was under the rug, saying that everybody's day to day. No depth charts have been released. That's all. That's only the 2 cents that I'll say, and I'll let you take it away. But very, very, very fishy stuff going on. So though I'm going to leave them at questionable. I don't really know what's going on there.
Yeah, anytime Dabo says day to day, you're gonna see. I think you're gonna see him sparingly. I just think that's Dabo coach talk. But I don't know, man. I mean, Georgia has always had a good running back room, I feel like. And the minute we give up on that running game or we focus on something else on defense, one of their non-stars are going to go off on us. So in my case, I think you stop the running game and make Carson Beck throw the ball. That's just me.
I would be careful how to handle that. And to your point, though, to Cliff, I would say this. With the veteran offensive line that Georgia's coming back with, I will say this. Center position is – I'm not saying it is a liability, but it could be. You've got Jared Wilson there replacing Cedric Van Pran, which started as a freshman all the way up until he was drafted this past season. So it's the first game with, a new center. A lot more athletic than Cedric, but the question is, at least from a Georgia perspective, will he be able to handle – right, Mike IDs, right, things like that, right, handling the calls, the mental aspect, if you will, of the center position. And we know that center position is the most important along the line. It all starts there. But at the same time, the veteran leadership there of the offense and Carson in year 2, I think my expectation is a significant upstep in production. And he had a really good season last year. Mm-hmm. I just think that with Clemson, it's going to be interesting because Tamarian Parker, Peter Woods, right? Y'all have got some guys. All right. You've got some guys that can get after the passer. So you're looking at guys like Xavier Truss at right tackle. I'm going to see how he handles things because from the sounds of things, he's had a good offseason, right? He's had a good camp, everything. He's lost weight, got better footwork. But there were times last season that infuriated Georgia fans. And of all things, there was one specific instance at Vanderbilt, of all places, where you make a freshman mistake, overextending and allowing the defensive end to come in. If that happens against Clemson, that's not good. That's not good. So things have got to get short up there at right tackle. But I think for the most part, you'll be fine, and Carson can get protected. If he gets the protection he needs, it can get ugly for anybody. I just feel like this offense, it doesn't, to me, I feel like people overlook Georgia's offense as boring. But then when you're averaging 40 points a game, how is it not explosive? It's not Tennessee's, I understand, but it's efficient.
Yeah.
So,
efficient.
Yeah.
Right. And Griffin, I think that's where, to piggyback off Robert's point, I think that's where the Clemson defensive front four has to come into play. And if we have any chance to win the ball game, those guys just have to turn in a phenomenal performance. You've got the dudes to do it. Peter Woods, of course, he's returning his second season. Consensus 5-star. I think he was the number 5 overall recruit in the country. Poached him right out of Alabama. And then you've got TJ Parker as well, who was a first-team freshman All-American last year at defensive end. And you got other guys. DeMonte Capehart is another one, former 5-star recruit from Hartsville, South Carolina. You've got guys up front that are big, they're fast, and physical.
I'd like to throw in Peyton Page out of Dudley.
Yeah.
He was a monster coming out of high school. Covered him.
Yeah,
he was a monster. And he's lost a lot of weight, too, to play the true nose.
Yeah.
Right. So, Griffin, what do those guys have to do up front in order, as Robert said, if Carson Beck has time, then he's lethal. He can pick you apart. So what has to be done for this Clemson front four to get the pressure needed to, even if they don't get to him, to at least cause a little bit of a moment of pause and a little bit of disruption in that Georgia passing attack?
Well, I'm looking at the edges there. I mean, Peter Woods moving to edge, cutting weight. That is a scary man coming off the edge. I will say that. TJ Parker had a great year. I'm expecting, especially with the new defensive ends coaching, Chris Rumpf. If he had any success that he did in years past, he's back. I expect those guys to maybe not have their looks all the time, but they could, spoil the party for Carson Beck. But Carson Beck is one of the best quarterbacks in the country. He'll be a first round NFL draft pick, in my opinion. I'll give him his flowers. I would not be surprised if he's a Heisman finalist. And if he works on his deep ball, which from what I've heard that he has really been putting in the work to do that, this is a very, very scary offense. I'm telling you, with or without ETN. No matter if Brock Bowers is there, Ladd McConkey, Georgia have the next man up mentality similar to Clemson. But I really think that you have to get to him early. I think if Clemson want a chance to win this game, you're going to have to start out strong. You have to start out early, make a statement early. That's all it's going to take, and you have to put it in your control. And you got to hope from there that you're able to do that and finish strong. And that's been a big thing in the Clemson fall camp. Dabo Swinney has been putting it all over. Finish. That's all they have to do. So, I mean, there's a lot that you need to do for this game, and I really think that TJ Parker and Peter Woods are going to have a big game to do it.
Yeah, so my question,
Right.
and well, my one question is, you got the front four. Who if something happens and we have an injury up front, who do you think needs to step up and be that fourth guy? Because I've heard that we're thin at defensive line. Is that true or false?
There's a lot of ways you can do it. Linebacker.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if he was considered edge or linebacker. Sorry.
I believe he's a linebacker, but I'm sure that he could, crowd the box, play edge. But Steph Island Green, I'm looking at AJ Hoffler.
Yeah.
I'm looking on the edge.
Steph Green, Vic Burley, perhaps.
Vic Burley. I'm expecting, some shades out of him throughout this season, but I mean, Garrett would know more than me. I'll keep it honest. Garrett knows the depth chart. He knows all these guys. But there are a couple guys that I expect. But I'm really relying on those core four guys out of the defensive line.
Yeah. Like you said, Stephen Green, Vic Burley's guys. Burley missed all of last season. He was injured. And so he's been working his way back in. But certainly somebody, he may be the silent assassin, if you will, if somebody has to come in and fill a spot or be a stopgap, because he was a former 5-star recruit himself. He's a very talented guy. And he'll be seeing his first action as a college player this year. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, an X factor for me on the Clemson defense, and we haven't talked about them at all. We would be remiss if we didn't. And that's the Clemson linebackers. And that's led by Barrett Carter. Barrett Carter is a 2-time All-American, very easily could have gone pro and probably would have been a 3rd, 4th round draft pick and made a lot of money. But now that he's back, he's got to be the guy, to me, that just is the rally point that gets the entire defense going. And you've got 2 guys on opposite ends of the spectrum. You've got the seasoned veteran and Barrett Carter, but then you've got the talented super freshman 5-star Sammy Brown, who, Robert, I know it came down to a battle between Clemson and Georgia for Sammy Brown. And, look, we feel the pain of recruiting heartbreak too. Sammy Brown had to be a tough guy to let slip out of your own backyard.
Yeah, I think it was. I mean, considering all things considered, being at Jefferson right there near Georgia. I will say this, right? I think Georgia made the most out of that situation with Sammy going to Clemson by picking up Justin Williams. Georgia's linebacker room was absolutely loaded in the 24 class. But you can't sit here and deny that missing out on a guy like Sammy Brown, the athlete that he is, that has to sting a little bit, for sure.
Yeah, I saw Sammy Brown last year when he played at Wren. The dude is insane. The dude can punt. Like, the dude punted the ball for 150 yards, 3 times for 150 yards. Like, the dude is an athlete.
Are we talking special teams here?
Yes.
Nolan Hooser, guys. Hey, I'm just going to let y'all know. I'm as a Georgia fan, I kept up with Nolan out of Huff here. I saw he won the starting kicker job. Listen, if you get into a situation, I know it's early and it's game 1, but if I'm a Clemson fan, I think you got a good one there. I'll live that there. I know it's enough special teams probably, but hey, special teams matters.
Yeah,
very true.
but it just going back to Sammy Brown. When I saw him punt the ball for 103 times for 150 yards, I was like, okay, we got somebody. And I saw the way he played at linebacker and running back. I was just like, holy crap.
Yeah, no, his athleticism is off the charts. I do think the one thing that he could stand to develop is linear running. Very linear guy. Very fast linear, right down up north, south. But running sideline to sideline, I do think that's maybe an area for improvement. But nonetheless, kid's an athletic freak. It's insane. It's just nasty how athletic that kid is. I would expect him to be kind of an early contributor for y'all, I would assume.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of what we're expecting as well. There's some guys that come in and you just know that even as freshmen, they're day one contributors. And, I think the two for us, one on either side of the ball, Sammy Brown, obviously on defense, and Bryant Wesco at wide receiver, because he's drawn he was as an early enrollee and through the spring game and spring ball. Everybody has raved about Bryant Wesco and how good he is. So, I think those are two guys that contribute right from the jump.
Well, Sammy Brown's first play in the spring game was a edge rush to a sack.
And the problem was he cooked Tristan Lee on that too, though.
Oh, he did. Yeah, he did. And that scared me on the offensive line side.
That's the thing about spring games, though.
Don't trust him.
That's the one thing about spring games. Like when you're going against yourself, you're like, yes, what a play, boy. Wait a minute, wait. It's not good. That's not good. That's that constant battle. It's always that battle.
Tiger Mountain RV and Cabins. Are you ready for a scenic escape in Seneca, South Carolina? Nestled near Clemson University and with Lake Hartwell in our backyard, our campground is the perfect place to relax and unwind. Our RV sites are equipped with full hookups, convenient pull-throughs, and back-end options to suit your needs. But it's not just about the location. We also offer a friendly and dynamic atmosphere that will make you feel right at home with year-round availability. Why wait? Come experience the great Tiger Mountain and RV Cabins. Well, all right, guys, as we're kind of winding down toward the end here, we're going to give some score predictions in a minute. But before we do that, let's go down the line. We'll start with Robert, then go to Cliff and Griffin, and then I'll bring up the rear on this one. But you look at this game, and when you pan it back and you look at the entire scope of this game, the matchups within the game itself, if you had to pick one X factor that could turn the tide of this game one way or the other, what would it be? What's that X factor that whoever wins this game has to do it? They have to do it right. And Robert, you take this one first.
I think if I'm looking at it right here, I think this is a game that Dom Lovett should have a big game. There's other people on the Georgia offense that I'm looking at that I think could create explosive plays. I'm thinking Arian Smith being one. I think if you can get Wade Woodaz out of the box and coverage, I think if you can do that by design, you've got a good shot if you're Georgia, especially with the right person if he's covering. But I think this might be a big game for Dom Lovett. Just get that feeling, especially if ETN is indeed suspended. You might look for Carson Beck to kind of sling it a little bit more. Georgia, since Todd Monken, we've turned into a pass more, I would say more of a pass team, if you will. But I think depending on how things go, you're going to have to establish a run. But I think Dom Lovett might be the guy that had that kind of big impact type game to decide the game.
So do I just have to pick one?
No, you pick whatever you want.
Yeah.
It's so hard.
I think I know it is. On defense, and this is probably the obvious one, but I'm going to say Barrett Carter. And then on offense, I'm just going to say the whole offensive line. Like, I just want to see. I know everybody's been saying that they're better, and yes, they won the first scrimmage, I get that. But I heard the same thing coming out of last year, and I just want to see it. Like, I just want to see it on the offensive line. So it's the offensive line and then Barrett Carter.
For me, give me Antonio Williams. I'm gonna go Robert Trout on a receiver here. Clemson's been in need of a wide receiver one, and I know Williams was kind of that guy 2 years ago. Last year was a little bit more Tyler Brown because Williams was sidelined. But from what I've heard in fall camp, Williams has been nothing but he has grown a lot over his last 2 years. He's become more of a leader, and he's a guy that I could see breaking out again. I mean, it's funny that I'm saying again because he was a freshman All-American 2 years ago. But I do think Cade needs a number one receiver, and why not go to the kid that you came to Clemson with, and a guy like Antonio Williams. Bryant Wesco could make an impact. I don't think so week one. I think that Cade is going to go to a guy that he knows currently, and I think Antonio Williams is that guy, and he's finally healthy.
Yeah, and for me, and I tell you what, I'm going to be the divergent here. When I look at this game, obviously, we know how good Georgia is on both sides of the ball. On the Clemson side, Clemson's defense is really good. They're a top 5 defense in the country as well, and I really believe that. That's a proven commodity. I'm not worried so much about the defense. I'm not so much worried about Phil Maffa. Obviously, Cade Klubnik playing well is a big concern, and like Cliff said, show me. We need to see it before we're going to believe it. But I said I was going to be the odd man out when I picked the key to this game. And so I'm going to be that guy. And I'm going to say it's the kicking game. It is going to play a big factor in this one. And the reason I say that is when you go back to last year's season opener at Duke, Clemson put themselves in a precarious situation early in that ball game when they could have taken the lead, could have put Duke behind the 8 ball, and Robert Gunn missed 2 chip shot field goals. And things just continued to go south from there. I'm going to go back to what Robert said. You've got Nolan Hoser, unbelievable kicker out of Hugh High School, just north of Charlotte in North Carolina. The guy has leg for days. He had a game-winning field goal in high school, I think was 61 or 62 yards. So kicking, look, I expect this to be I'm not going to say a low-scoring game, but the defenses, I think, are going to play very well. Points will be at a premium. When points are at a premium, you have to be able to capitalize inside the red zone. Part of that is being able to effectively kick the ball, which Clemson last year, it got to a point it was so bad that we had to go bring a guy out of retirement who already had his plane ticket in his hand to go start a career on Wall Street. He was headed to LaGuardia. And we had to go bring Jonathan Whites out of retirement. And look, God bless Jonathan Whites. Look, he won us the game at South Carolina. We won by 9. He kicked 3 field goals. But you can't rely on that. You need a reliable guy that coming in can make those kicks. Nolan Hoser, excuse me, I think he's going to end up playing an enormous role in this ballgame.
I like it.
I definitely think you got to capitalize. You don't want to live with field goals, but you got to make and convert field goals when you get the opportunity to get the points, regardless of who the team is in this game.
Right. Well, and I'll say this before we pick scores. I just have to throw this in there as long as we're talking about field goal kicking and special teams. Georgia, you guys were spoiled for a very long time with Blankenship back there. I mean, he looked like he was straight out of Revenge of the Nerds, but my God, the guy could absolutely kick.
Respect the specs. Respect the specs. I love it.
Yeah, no doubt about it. All right. Well, we've broken this game down about as well as we know how, and we've given our X factors. So now it's time to just throw out our score predictions. And tell you what, I'm going to invert things a little bit. Griffin, I'll start with you, then Cliff, and then I'll give mine, and we'll save we'll let Robert, we'll go last with him. He's our special guest, and we know he's going to pick Georgia. Wouldn't expect anything less, but we'll let him close it out with his pick. So
a game time decision, like Kirby Smart says. It's a game time decision. You never know.
So Griffin, we'll start with you. What you got, man?
Fair. Well, first of all, it's a great privilege for both these teams to be playing on this high of a stage. It's a lot of fun. Week one always is very exciting, and it's exciting to not only be here as, someone that goes to Clemson, but playing a team like Georgia, it's a great opportunity. So with that being said, I'll break it down really quickly. First half, I think it's a little bit closer, that type thing. But the second half, I've consistently seen that Kirby Smart energy, locker room, and you see that Georgia rumbling towards that third and fourth quarter. I believe this is the first time that I am not picking Clemson on this podcast, but I really think that Georgia are the better team on paper here. I don't think it's a bad loss for Clemson. I just think Georgia is the better team here. They're my national championship pick. I'm going to go 27-17 Georgia. You're muted.
Yeah, turn your microphone on, Cliff.
My bad. Not so fast.
Been there.
So yeah, not so fast. I'm gonna be that guy. I think this is the diehard Clemson guy coming out in me, but I'm gonna go with that field goal advantage, and I think there's gonna be some points put on the board, just from what I'm seeing. I have expectations that Clemson's offense is going to be better. And I'm going to say 27-24.
All right. Well,
he said 27-24 Georgia on that one, or 27?
Come on now. Okay. Come on now. Yeah.
I didn't hear a team. Clemson. That's why I had to ask.
Yeah.
I think he was.
Yeah. I didn't say
he was just being very subtle about that.
Yeah.
All right, so mine is very similar to Cliff. I look at this game, and I think it's going to be a knockdown, drag-out game. It typically is when Clemson and Georgia play. I look back at the two season openers in 2013 and 14. I was actually at the 2013 game in Death Valley. That was a very high-scoring ball game. It almost came down to who had the ball last. 2014, it was a high-scoring game. Georgia pulled away late. Todd Gurley just did what Todd Gurley did. He went off in the second half.
Todd Gurley did Todd Gurley things, absolutely.
Right, and it was still a relatively high-scoring game. And then you've got 2021 in Charlotte, where Georgia wins 10-3 on a pick six. Neither offense could score more than 3 points. So I don't think it's going to be 10-3. I don't think it's going to be 38-35 like it was in 2013. I think it's going to be somewhere in the middle. The defenses are going to play well. The offense is for both teams are going to make some plays. And going back to my X factor, I think a big kick late in the ball game is going to decide it. Clemson 24, Georgia 21.
I like y'all's enthusiasm. My game time decision
it's
actually turned out to be
and maybe misplaced bravado.
I'll give Clemson credit. I think you've got to capitalize on the special teams, and this game, I think this game might be one of those that like a special teams play is going to make a momentum swing if you're not careful.
Yeah.
It's very easy to do. You go back into 2021. Right, there's so much that has changed on both teams. It's not a 10-3 game. I can guarantee that. No. Georgia's offense from then to now has evolved light years. And honestly, Clemson's has to a certain degree too, because, DJU's not there anymore. But neither here nor there. You're welcome, Florida State. Yeah. But no, I think this game is going to start off. I think it's going to be a slow game. I think both defenses are going to be swarming. It's going to cause a lot of, I wouldn't say stagnance in the offenses. But I definitely think it'll be a low-scoring game in that first quarter. Honestly, you might even see Clemson up, maybe 7-3. Maybe I don't know. We'll see. But I think as the game goes on, after the second half, Kirby and that coaching staff is one of the best staffs at making adjustments, not only in game but definitely at half. But I think another thing is the depth. I think Georgia's defense, with where we are, I think is healthy enough to be able to rotate, stay fresh, and it's going to cause problems for offensive lines. And it shows that. I think depth plays a huge part here, and I think Georgia kind of pulls away in that second half. I've got Georgia maybe 38-21, Georgia. I just think that second half is going to be when things kind of get out of hand and start pulling away, and I think it's just because it's a testament to the depth at Georgia. I know Clemson's front, like starting 11, I love y'all's defense. But the question is the 2 deep, the 3 deep, when those guys are gassed and they need to take plays off, Georgia might take shots. And I think that's something that has to come into play here. So I've got 38-21.
So you think they cover?
Enough.
I think so. I think so. When it's a big game like this and it's not an FCS school, give me the cover, because when it's an FCS school, I don't see us covering like that. I just don't. It's weird, but it is what it is. I think one of the things for both teams is some streaks from last season need to stop. Georgia's, I need an opening drive touchdown to not happen for Clemson. And I think for Clemson, y'all are more than likely wanting Cade Klubnik to not turn the ball over, because most every game we gave up an opening drive touchdown, and every game, including the bowl game, Cade Klubnik calls the turnover. I think both of those streaks need to happen and stop, but at the same time, I don't know if they do. We shall see.
It's going to be interesting. Yeah, and I'll tell you what, look, we're 3 hours away from midnight, and 3 hours from now, it is going to be Clemson, Georgia Eve officially. It's almost here. We've waited 8-9 long months to get back to this point, and here we are. So all that's left to do now is to tee it up and let's go play a little football. But either way, I think it's going to be exciting. A game like this is good for college football, not just for Clemson fans, not just for Georgia fans. These marquee matchups are good for the game, period. I think it'll be entertaining. And look, either way, come what may, whoever wins, hopefully both teams get out of there healthy and in pretty good shape. And who knows? Look, this game doesn't predicate the playoff hopes one way or the other of either team, not with the 12-man playoff. So who knows? This might be the first of two meetings between Clemson and Georgia this year. We'll see how it goes. But, Robert, we appreciate you joining in. Robert of the DGD podcast. You can check those guys out for some more Georgia perspective. And, of course, us here at Around the Paul. Robert, thanks for dropping in, man, and thanks for giving your valuable insight into Georgia. We've enjoyed having you.
Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, absolutely. And for myself, I'm Garrett Mitchell, Griffin Barfield, and Clifton Kennedy. We will talk to you. We will see you in Atlanta on Saturday. We'll talk to you after what is hopefully a Clemson Tiger victory. But until then, those of us here at Around the Paul, we say good luck, Godspeed, God bless, and as always, go Tigers.
Go Tigers.
Go Tigers.
Go Dogs.